So, welcome Nitin, welcome to this edition of SignalQuest with BVHK. The objective of this podcast is for me to find signal in the vast amount of noise that is out there. So, thanks for doing this, Nitin.
Pleasure to be here, of course. And when you say signal in all the noise, so let's hope that the signal to noise ratio is decent at the end of it all. We'll
Yes,
find
yes.
out. So
Yes,
let's go and see how
yes,
it
we'll
goes.
find out. So
Um,
before we get started with, I have some questions, but I will definitely, go beyond those questions. So how would you describe yourself, Nitin?
oh, you're making it very philosophical. First of all, I mean, I am a guy I won't call myself a geek or a nerd, but definitely somebody who's keenly interested in using computers for the betterment of society. That's how, right from, sort of college days, I've been singularly focused on systems and later, of course, management. So, systems and management are the kind of two bedrocks. And of course, on a personal side, great sports lover, particularly cricket, and I'm so happy that what happened in the last test. So, it was something out of really unimaginable. So that's my other passion. Beyond that, nothing much
Yeah.
otherwise.
So those three topics, system, leadership, and cricket, I think are enough for us to have a wonderful chat today. So thanks for that introduction, Nitin. Let's start with the leadership side. Right? So set up multiple GCCs in India, and I've described you earlier as one of those, Tendulkar or Federer kind of people who straddled in multiple generations. Back when GCCs were not known as GCCs to now, what they are. So, what has been the experience like? What do you see differently today as compared to how things were when you started?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in fact, there's a sea change in terms of not just the names. Names, of course, have been evolving, but even in terms of how what work happens and how it happens and all that. So I think the biggest change is in terms of the mindset in both sides. The parent companies, whether in the US or Europe or wherever, they used to think of the Indian entity or some earlier, of course, it was through vendors, but even if they had their own entity, it was thought of as kind of like a vendor. They didn't say it openly, but it was kind of like, okay, we are outsourcing it, rather than doing our own thing. So that has definitely changed. The second thing that has changed is in terms of the kind of work. So it was typically grunt work or very low end work, something which could was repeatable. In fact, these days we are talking about AI. Basically, anything which could AI could do, easily. So that is, but of course, that time AI was not on the horizon. But they said, okay, this can be easily given, and specs are clear, SOP is clear, anybody can do it. So why not do it remotely? So that's how it started. And of course, the whole raison d'etre of having that center was to reduce cost. There was nothing else. They didn't really expect anything big except that, okay, all the grunt work can happen at a very low price point, and therefore we can improve our EBITDA and look better in financial terms. That's all there was. From there to today, fast forward today, where people are setting up GCCs, sometimes, I mean, the cost advantage is always there. I mean, it's still there, and I'm glad it's there. But more importantly, there are things which they cannot find elsewhere or in the headquarters in at scale. Yes, you can always find a few people, and there are some really talented people in the headquarters. But at scale, when they want to do something which is very high end, and of course today we talk about AI, but even earlier, whether it was predictive analytics, whether it was high end coding, architecture, all those things. Sometimes, if they had to tell their clients that we have the right processes, so you could have these centers go through the earlier we had ISO, then we had CMMI levels and whatnot, and the best place to work and all kinds of accolades. So it was easy, relatively easy to get these done, have a very standardized process, but at the same time do high end work. And this combination was very difficult to find, and particularly at scale, like I said. So that is where it is. In fact, I'll tell you something which one of the R&D divisions of a manufacturing company in India, in Pune actually, That guy was a German who had come to set it up, and he set up. And then when he was leaving, I was talking to him, and he told me this, that which actually cockled, the my heart. He said that when we came for cost, basically lower price point. But today, he says, the engineers that I have here, even if I have to pay them the same salary or even higher salary than those in Germany, I will still do the center here. And that is the real vindication of a GCC. That it's not just for cost, you are able to do things which you might not be able to do, or at least might not be able to do easily in other places in the world. And that's where we have
Right.
evolved.
Yeah. In fact, that reminds me of an anecdote. My friend was telling me about this. So he was working with Cisco, and he was in sales. So he had one of his prospects flying to the US. So he thought he will arrange for an executive briefing center visit in the US. And there was a form that he had to fill, and he spoke about some product which they had just launched. And the lady who was managing the ABC, she said, "No, this is not possible." And this guy is like trying to sell this product to this prospect, and he's in the US. So she says, "No, you have to do it in India because our India center is actually the most advanced in terms of the EBC." So it was funny that he actually had to tell his person who was in Bangalore that yes, you are in the US. Look at some of those products there, but for the real latest product, you have to come back to Bangalore. So I think
Yeah,
that's how things have evolved. The people have done it well. I think they've done this. So one
yeah.
question that came to mind, Nitin, when you were describing this change, was there any sort of inflection point when this changed? Did you see that, and what triggered that?
Um, so two things. One is that it's been evolutionary. It's not a revolution. It's not like a
Correct.
switch got flipped one day. So definitely inflection point, if it was there, it was
Hmm.
very subtle. And even today you will find a wide variety of GCCs. I mean, there's still people who do just the grunt work, so let's
Right.
face it. And I'm not trying to belittle the work
Hmm.
that they do, because they're serving a good important thing. But let's put it this way: the if you look at Zeno, for example, talks about four stages, the outpost, and something module leader, and finally the thing is about the whole strategic or portfolio management kind of a thing. So if you look at it, the if you look at the percentages in each of these things, earlier predominantly everybody was in the first or second quadrant, first and a little lower in the second, and maybe one or two in the last, if at all. And from there, today we have a situation where things have moved to a stage where bulk of the people are in the third quadrant, bulk
Right.
of the GCCs. There are still a few in the first and second, and a few, a lot more than earlier in the fourth quadrant. So that's one big change. And also the pace at which, see, typically they used to talk about evolution of the center, right? You mature, the center matures and starts with the in the leftmost place, and then slowly goes. But that has changed. Now you have centers being set up which directly jump to the third or the fourth, and that is a big, and that comes from the mindset change, and that mindset has evolved over the years. And so many factors come into the play there. So for example, a lot of people who were working for US companies, Indian origin, sometimes they wanted to come back, right? So they had this seed, and they had these role models where and the glass ceiling was no longer there. You could aspire to be even the CTO, or maybe not the CEO yet, but CFO, etc. Those kind of roles started happening in India. And the second thing, even in the US, we all know about all the big time CEOs who, Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai, and you name it, all those people are there. um, but not just the CEO level, even at the CXO level, which is where these centers typically get decided. It's usually not at the CEO level. The decision is at the CXO level. And at the CXO level, there are so many people of Indian origin. And of course, they have teams who have so many people from Indian origin background, that the whole thing started becoming that it's a no brainer. If you're not doing it, something is wrong. And also, when P came into the picture, or VCs came into the picture, right? They caught on to this because they are there to count the
Right.
dollars, right? So for them, it was, if you said that, look, you don't have anything, that was a big red flag. If you're not doing something in India. So in fact, even startups, I mean, they started thinking that okay, from day one I should have something
Hmm.
in India, from the development
Hmm.
side at least, right? And then later other things also, back office and so on, so on. So a whole bunch of factors kind of came together. So I wouldn't say it was one inflection point. It has been a steady shift from the first quadrant to the towards the last final
Right,
quadrant.
right. And like you described, like I see this almost as a change management thing, right? Because you're talking of change of mindset, not the
Yeah, yeah,
CXOs. So, what does the role of the GCC head, in India,
hmm.
how does that sort of pan out in trying to convince the CXOs that this is the kind of center that we can have here, which will give
Yeah,
this kind of deliver this kind of value, attracting those kind of people because this is a sided himself or herself cannot do everything. And also navigate the entire system because a lot of times there will be a typical lattice structure where individuals product lines will be reporting to people in the US and things like that. So there's a lot of navigation that needs to happen. So how
yeah,
did you do that? How did you see others navigating that both at the HQ
yeah.
level as well as your peers and people who worked in your sites as well?
Yeah, yeah. So, there's some element of the personality involved in that, in terms of, if you're a confrontationist kind of a person, or if you're a, I have several friends who are like very, this way, this has to
Right.
be this way. How can you not
Right. Right.
understand it? If you're that kind of a person, you're less likely to
Right.
become successful in
Right.
this role, because this role is not about authority, power. It's about influencing. It's about building bridges. It's about enlightening the people without making them feel that you are being condescending. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. Okay, every time I went to any company that I led, if I said that okay, the industry increment rate in India this year is going to be 12% or whatever 13%, and I need that to keep up with the market, right? The standard question which used to come back was, oh my god, if we are doing 2% in the US, and if you do like 12%, then in no time the whole cost advantage will
Right.
be gone, right? Now, from 19 whatever 80s when we started GCCs to today, the per hour dollar rate has not changed by much. And why is that? There's major factors. One is that the increments are pretty much taken care of by the dollar
Correct.
appreciation with respect to
Mhm.
the rupee. So I always used to tell them that, look, you don't worry about the increments. The increments, the dollar rupee exchange rate will take care of. You know, so that's one factor. And the other factor is by having a proper managing the pyramid properly. So typically, if you are growing, if you kind of don't go with us, some of the services industries fell into the trap where every second year they would promote people, and then soon they had a big fat layer in between. And now today we are seeing the effects of that, right? I mean,
Right.
TCS announced 2% reduction typically at the middle and senior levels, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure this is not going to end. It's going to continue happening. But if you manage that pyramid well, where you say that the growth is predominantly, you keep making the pyramid in such a way that the people who are at the bottom level are more in numbers, then the average cost kind of continues to remain there. So now these two concepts are alien to the people there. So you have to explain this, but you have to explain it in not saying, don't you understand this much? You don't have to say that. So you have to bring that out, have some nice graphs, etc. Talk to people, building rapport, right? I mean, and see, the GCC leader is in a very I would say almost in a unique position, in a bad way, in the sense that typically they don't, like you said, there's a lot of matrix reporting. So I've seen and I've been in that position where you don't have anybody reporting to you,
Right.
right? Everybody reports into the
Mhm.
headquarters, but you still have to get the whole thing done. You still have to maintain that identity, and you have to make the others feel that you are serving them, and you are, so basically you have to make them feel that your job is to help them win. And that's there's a inherent suspicion, right, in people's minds, that oh, my team will go away, my jobs will go away, my those are
Right.
legitimate fears. So you have to if you can make sure that you build a relationship with each of these stakeholders where they see you not as an adversary but as somebody, a collaborator who's there to help them succeed, and of course in the process help the company succeed, then that is the sort of key to the whole thing. Now, you can't have it one way, right? I mean, you can't just be that kind of person, but the other side you'll always have some people who you can never convince. In that case, then what do you how do you
Mhm.
deal with that? So you will get these
Mhm.
bottlenecks. So when to escalate, how much to try before saying that, okay, this battle is not worth fighting, let me try it
Mhm.
another way. These are the kind of things. So I would argue that more than technology, the GCC leader's job is much more of people management, not just downward, but sideways and
Right.
upwards. And that if you have those skills, and a lot of these skills cannot be taught. I mean, you can hone them certainly, but these are something. Some part of it is your personality. Part of it is your what you're willing to put up with. Sometimes you may be thwarted in something that you want to do. So there are times when we did something under the radar. So how do you prove that you can have innovation when nobody's giving you the budget for innovation? So then you got to you know try something under the wraps, and then at the appropriate time, at the appropriate to the appropriate person, showcase that and saying that, look, we can
Mhm.
do this. Why don't we try it out? These are the kind of things. So some subterfuge, some mollycoddling. So sam dam dandabed, as we say, right? So that's the kind of a thing that you have to bring to
Right.
bear. And of course, you rightly said that you can't do anything. So the most critical thing on the India side is getting the right people in the right roles, particularly the second level. Because so to give an example, when I started one of the companies, and it was going to start with literally a small insourcing of a small IT support team from a service
Mhm.
provider, and that's all IT that there was going to be. But there was obviously a plan to bring engineering and product management and all of that in the future. But when we started, so I went and hired a person who was like a senior director earlier in another company, who for whatever reasons was available, and who was, I knew that he had the potential. And I told him that, look, today the team is going to be very small, doing only, and you may have to do literally setting up the network and all that kind of stuff also you have to do. I know you are an engineering leader, but believe me that this will go well. And he trusted me enough to come in. And today, fast forward, after 9 years, actually after 6 years or so, he became the VP of engineering and controlling major product portfolios, and including product management was under him. So, but that investment had to be made at that time. He had to be convinced that you can't pay him that much, you can't give him that kind of a title, but this is something which, it's almost like a startup that
Mhm.
you built, right? How do you attract the right people to the startup if you're not a
Mhm.
co-founder? I mean, not the co-founders, but
Right.
after that, right? This is like you're not a
Mhm.
co-founder, you yourself are not a co-founder. Right? And then on top of that, you're trying to attract
Mhm.
people. And sometimes these companies, when they are doing, they comes at times because they are not doing so well financially. So if they go up and look up, if it's a public company, they know that what the
Right.
situation is. Even if it's not public, today's world, people
Right.
know how we are
Mhm.
going. So to kind of paint that, I'm not saying a dream, but it's
Right.
like a
Right.
dream. And this is the
Right.
vision. This is where you
Mhm.
want to be, and I want you to participate, come in on the ground floor and help me
Right.
build. And you have to be humble enough to tell them that, look, without you I
Mhm.
can't do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
need you. So it's not like, I'll give you this job, are you willing
Right.
to come? I need you, I
Mhm.
need your help. That's the approach, that and the same I need you approach also in the US. When you're trying to get projects, you're trying to get new assignments. So that whole sort of a persona has to be very, very humble, very sort of influential and vulnerable, but at the same time in engendering some kind of a trust and
Right.
optimism. That's how I will
Yeah,
sum it
yeah.
up.
So when you were speaking, Nitin, I was almost visualizing you sitting with the, Art of War kind of a book, Sun Tzu, and, trying to figure out what battles you're going to fight and all of that. And the next thought that came to mind, I have a lot of other questions that, popped up in my mind. But one question that came to mind is now, like you said, not a lot of these things can be taught. But in my mind, you're an outlier. The way you're thinking about this, the reason why you have done this so many times successfully is because you have done all these things so well. But do you actually see people getting into the role of a GCC site head, understanding the nuances and appreciating this whole landscape that you just described, and being able to deal with it in the way it should be?
Yes, primarily because now there are so many of these GCCs that you get a chance to observe from within, and you know what works, what doesn't work, and so on and so forth. So um, not everybody is cut out for this,
Right.
of course. So there are, I mean, the same engineering leader that I talked about, he would not become a good GCC
Hmm.
leader, but he's an excellent engineering leader. So not everybody is cut out for that, but it's possible to find enough people who can step into these roles, can be groomed into these roles. You can do succession planning, so you don't have to necessarily have the kind of a, like a Hindustan Lever would have a
Right.
management track. You don't need that kind of
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
scale, but you can certainly find people in every GCC who can be groomed. And even for new GCCs, now I'm helping some companies set up GCCs. We are able to find people who, again, when you are hiring, when for such a position, you don't you won't always find people who have done that
Correct.
exact role, but you can find people who have the potential to do that role. And how do you assess that potential? So that you do through scenario playing and hypothetical examples you ask, and you ask about how did you deal with a critical situation, describe it to me. So you kind of read between the lines and try to figure out whether this person would be the right fit for such a role. And again, every GCC has its own, like I said, somebody wants to set it up for the fourth stage, somebody wants to set it up for the first stage. So the person also has to be
Hmm.
suitable for that, because it's one thing to set up at the first level and then but it's a rapid rise to the fourth level. But it's another thing to say that, okay, that's all I want just cost arbitrage for low end jobs. Then the kind of person you want is
Hmm.
very different. You want a person who's very SOP oriented, taskmaster, that kind of a thing, whereas not necessarily the visionary, because they will get
Hmm.
frustrated then. So knowing what the parent company is trying to do, what their kind of a vision is for the next few years, and then trying to identify people who have that kind of a bent of mind. Or even, I'll give you an example. One of the companies I was helping find a person like this, their ethos in the parent company itself was very consulting oriented, meaning almost everybody was from the big four, like the McKinseys of the world, and so they think like that. And therefore, they also said, and I also realized that to for the person to gel with them and to talk on the same wavelength, you need to have a person who has that kind of an
Honest.
experience, or at least
Honest.
things like that. Another person, typical engineering leader, would probably not fit in there.
Hmm.
uh, so those are the kind of things. So match, it's almost like matchmaking, right? I mean, you when you're doing this, this 36 gunas have to match. So out of 36, how many are
Right.
matching? You won't get 36, but can you get at least 28 or
Hmm.
30? So those are characteristics which you identify, saying that, okay, these are the kind of must haves. So if it's an engineering dominated GCC, then you want to make sure that the person may not be a deep into the engineering, but should have at least enough knowledge about it, so that the person understands what the technology trends, what are the what are the things happening there, should be able to figure out
Outcome.
if he's being
Right.
bluffed. That much. So maybe not exactly a master of all, but not a jack of all
Hmm.
also. Maybe master of a few
Right.
and jack
Yeah.
of others. That's the kind of a thing. But more, like I said earlier, more importantly, the personality, the way of the leadership style,
Hmm.
working style, that
Right.
is more
And would
important.
you say this is something very different from generic leadership skills, which would be required in, say, a manufacturing firm or a startup? How much is similar? How much is different? And because if it is different, then is there a systemic way for developing these leaders as well?
Yeah, so I will say, see, some leadership concepts will not
Right.
change. So those, I will say that at least 60% would be the same. Now, the things where they are different. So in a manufacturing setup, for example, uh, the it's more military like, right? I mean, there's less of consensus and more of this is the way you have to do it, and
Right.
no questions asked, right? Um, so that's a
Right.
almost autocratic way of doing it. Whereas here, it has to be exactly opposite, extremely democratic, extremely consensus oriented, at times to a fault. So sometimes things get delayed because you have to get multiple stakeholders aligned, multiple stakeholders to agree and sign off on something. So that's one thing. The other thing is, typically in GCCs, the talent retention is very, very important. So depending on what you're doing, on what most GCCs, if they are say product oriented, now the product knowledge becomes very critical, and as you get that only over a period of time, you can't hire somebody with that product knowledge, and now the person has gained that product knowledge over 2 3 years. If the person leaves, it's a big loss. So how do you nurture these people? How do you have a proper career path? Now career paths become so important. The And this is for all GCCs. Even the you may not be paying absolutely the top dollar in terms of salary, but how do you make sure that the overall package? So one example I'll give you. So um, the flexibility of working hours, the flexibility to work from home. COVID taught us that it can be done. So many companies have gone back to a stage where they are saying 100% in office. Most are saying at least 60% in office, right? But if a company is saying, well, you need not come to the office at all, except for specific, when we arrange something for collaboration or something. Except that, you can work permanently from home, and doesn't even have to be in the same city. Now that's a I've heard people say that that's the only reason why we have rejected many other lucrative offers, because this is something which we
Right.
really value. So this is just one example, but you can't imagine. So some other place I know that we used to promote people to go to conferences and fund it, etc. Now that was very important for some people, saying that I may get more salary, but I won't get this opportunity to kind of go and both interact and present at such conferences. So depending on what kind of workforce you have, being able to give them a package deal. Now that's something which requires thinking, which requires a pulse of the people. See, a lot of large companies, they say that the people say that they have never even met the CEO, never. Okay. Whereas every company that at least I ran, and what I advise to people also is that may not be, you can't obviously meet everybody every day, but make sure that you have some system whereby through which you can reach out not just to the management and the leadership, but to every individual
Right.
down the line, and try to get a pulse of that. Now these are things which can happen. Of course, GCC, if it's very big, then again you fall into the same trap. It may be difficult, but even a few hundred people up to 1,000, 2,000 people, you can do it systematically. So these are things which can be institutionalized, and once they're institutionalized, then even if the leader changes, there may be some tweaks, but by and large these things get perpetuated. So then the new leader automatically kind of starts following it, and it becomes a culture. So to move from some initiative to making it a part and parcel, where it eventually becomes culture and therefore gets into the behavior, that's the trick that you have to
Right.
do.
And in fact, this is something which is required for the GCC leaders' career progression as well, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
do
yes, absolutely.
companies do that? That today you are here. This is how we see you grow. This like how you are helping the site grow. This is going to be your path in the in the company.
Correct,
How
correct.
well does that happen today?
It doesn't happen as well as it should, but I know companies where at least the that you are a contender, for the CXO role or for the GCC
Hmm.
head role. But it's a double-edged sword. You don't want to uh, commit, and then for whatever reason you can't it doesn't happen,
Mhm.
then you lose the
Correct.
person. So you kind of, give enough hope, but at the same time with enough
Pushing.
caveats that, well, it may or may not happen. You have a
Right.
shot at it. That's how it should
Mm.
be.
One question that I've always had is, in traditional services companies, right? There's always this class divide between on-site and, offshore and client and, because you're in a service mindset that you're always, you're in the lower hang, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of our general Indian, societal mindset is also something that people say that we are great at instruction taking and we'll deliver, whatever is told to us. But initiative is not really, our default behavior. But GCCs have a mix, need to have a mix. They need to have a service mindset, but they also need to continuously sort of, expand the role by taking initiative. Is that a challenge that you see? Is it a systemic challenge
Absolutely.
for us? And how do we, address that? Do the HQ folks also look at, do they factor this in that this is something which we need less of? We need people to be more assertive. How do they look at this?
Yeah. So, two, three things that you said. So, one is about the innovative mindset and trying to build something better, etc. Typically, HQs do not uh, think of it as a mandate for the
Right.
GCC. There are exceptions, but most of them do not do that. And in fact, that, like I said earlier, sometimes you have to do this almost
Hmm.
under the radar. So whether you have a ideation kind of a platform, and then have some kind of a systematic way, whether you have hackathons, all of that, right? So how do you institutionalize that whole ideation and maturation of the ideation process, etc. That's usually the left to the GCC leader, and at times grudgingly, may not even be
Hmm.
willingly, but it's
Hmm.
possible to do it. And again, I have found that since generally speaking, people in this industry are paid well, it's not so much the monetary awards that go with that. It's more of the recognition. So if you have the right kind of communications and right kind of sort of talking about something which somebody has achieved through an idea, and we saved so much, or kudos to him, and give a small kind of a token thing which may not be very expensive, but it could even be a notional thing. Those are the kind of things that people really start getting excited about, and then that whole sort of, once the process starts, it kind of goes. The other thing is to be all inclusive. Sometimes people make the mistake of doing these things only in pockets, like only engineering will have its own thing. Now that's the biggest fallacy. In fact, most good innovations come only when it's cross
Hmm.
functional. Whether it's automation ideas, or whether it is some other new product ideas, they come only when there's a sort of a 360-degree team which is looking at it from different angles. And I've had some very good examples where something led to an automation only because some people didn't have enough work, and they sat down together, and over chai or coffee or something, they discussed something, and then they built something, and it became a really successful model which could be
Hmm.
replicated after that. So that's something which the headquarters may not uh, really promote, that we have to do ourselves. But at the same time, there are headquarters do sometimes complain about the fact that, well, the team does everything that we tell them to do, but we don't hear anything, how we could do
Right.
it better. And that's something they do say, and then that's something which we have to constantly tell people, to overcome that fear. uh, Stop thinking of headquarters as a
Hmm.
client, and start thinking of them as
Nice.
peers and collaborators, and some people with whom we should work together to do something
Hmm.
better. And because you can't do it in isolation, again, just like I gave that example of locally, all the other departments, but even unless you have the buy-in from headquarters, some of the things cannot be done. Otherwise, you'll be focused only on a very small subset. So to get them involved, make them excited about something that you're trying out, even kind of putting down on paper what are the risks, what are the sort of rollbacks in case something doesn't work properly. Is there a plan B? If you put all this together, then people would be willing to give it a
Right.
shot. So that's something where the individuals concerned may need support from the leaders, CXOs, as well as the GCC leader. Don't worry, I will talk to the senior
Right.
person there and get his or her okay, and then you can talk to your whoever counterpart there. So these are the kind of things where you have to work behind the scenes and kind of prep them. Even helping in terms of, see, the other thing which I found was a lot of times people have ideas, but the people who have ideas are not that great at articulating
Right.
those ideas. And therefore, uh, what we did was we found people who are good at visualization, articulation, communication, all of that. And we, in that system, we assigned, we every time somebody came with an idea, if we thought there was the slightest merit in it, we would assign one or two people like this and say that, look, help them build a kind of a, call it a business case, call it whatever, right? Proof of concept. And then that really helped, because this person could not articulate exactly how that's
Mm.
going to help. They didn't even have an idea that there's something called ROI. You have to talk about cost, you have to talk about savings. They
Right.
have no
Right.
idea. They just think, oh, this is a cool
Right.
thing to do. So how do you translate all that? So that's the other support that we have to build, and that again can be
All right. Mm.
institutionalized. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be one leader
Right.
who does that, but through a setting up a process which specifically does this, then chances of those ideas maturing and becoming something implementable become much
Right.
higher.
Is the GCC head then almost fighting a lonely battle where he or she is the one person who has to, align all of these different
Um, Not
proposals?
entirely. No, not entirely. So two things I found
Hmm.
work well. One is that, like I said, the next line
Right.
level, see, call them CXOs for want
Hmm.
of a better
Hmm.
word, but the functional
Right.
heads, right? Engineering head, the IT head, this finance, HR, whatever, operations, all those
Hmm.
people. So typically that becomes like a local
Right.
SLT,
Hmm.
and that team has to work
Hmm. Hmm.
together
Okay.
towards this. That's one. And number two, it's always important to have some kind of a champion. It may be the person the GCC head is reporting to, or the CXO is reporting to, or it could even be one
Right.
level
Hmm.
junior, somebody in a peer in the US or in wherever your headquarters are. So by having those people kind of
Okay. Then.
participate and making them partners in this whole exercise, you can also use them as sounding boards. You can use them to kind of push things at the right level very subtly. So that's something which I found very useful, not necessarily fight a lonely battle.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that you mentioned at the start was, systems. So obviously we're talking about GCC. So we should talk about technology, and I think the flavor of the year today is AI, right? So how do you think AI is? What is the role that it is playing? Because a lot of people just consider it as magic. That a lot of the things that we are now, giving to GCCs can be magically be done by AI. Obviously not, but AI is going to change the way people are working. So, how should GCC leaders just deal with this, tsunami that's coming?
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, part of it is nothing to do with GCC,
Right.
it's across the board. So let's
Right.
leave that aside for the time being. But as GCCs, I think the big change is that if the GCCs can show that they can embrace AI and actually in a meaningful way in the
Mm.
business, right? And through that, whether it is through reduction in manpower or not is not important, but if it can give either speed or it can give better quality or whatever. So I'll give an example. So um, one company that I worked for, that whole um, main business was kind of authorizing procedures or authorizing
Mm.
treatments, right? now if you can build an AI tool which can at least come up with, run through the whole gamut of background and history and medication and this and that, and come up with a sort of a recommendation for the doctor or the nurse to kind of
Hmm.
review. So many things the speeding up is like tremendous. And sometimes speed is of essence in these things. So what is your core business, and how can you help AI improve the core business? I mean, there will always be satellite things which you can keep doing and keep, you know improving in terms of cost and
Right.
speed and whatnot. But I think the GCCs have to think about the core business of the company, and how can the GCC help the company achieve that in a good, in a
Hmm.
meaningful way. That's something which I think GCCs have not really thought
Okay.
about. Sometimes it's assumed by the headquarters sometimes that, oh, they may not be
Hmm.
able to do that, but you shouldn't make that assumption. And if somebody is making that assumption, you should be willing to at least make a proof of concept, make something and say that, look, we want to be
Hmm.
part of
Hmm.
this. So get a seat at that table, the AI impact table in your company. See, the other thing is that it's it's relatively much cheaper to experiment
Right.
in India, right? Because even if you don't have any bench, typically GCCs don't
Right.
have bench. So it's difficult to do that. But even if you have to carve out some
Hmm.
time from people, or even sometimes you can have people who will be willing to do it over and above their
Hmm.
normal
Hmm.
job, right? Because of just the
Right.
excitement. So saying that, okay, would you be like to be involved in a AI project which will make the difference to the company? I mean, people will be willing to work
Rules.
extra
Hmm.
hours for that without any expectation. So doing that, we have to make sure that we are not in the as an afterthought. We are in the forefront of the AI revolution, because any company, any business, if you don't do that, you are soon become going to become
Correct.
irrelevant. So how do you remain relevant, not as a GCC but as a
Hmm.
company? Depends on AI. And therefore, how do you remain relevant as a GCC to that
Hmm.
strategy is
Right.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what he's saying is very true, and this is an opportunity because not a lot of these kind of disruptive forces have hit the whole world uniformly. That
Correct.
the GCC need not feel that they are behind the frontier line, so they'll have to wait for some of this to trickle down to them, and then they can do it. They are at the same level, and it's up to
Correct.
them to go ahead and make something of it. Having said that, the general sort of when we do these workshops and when we talk to people, the sense is that okay, market facing, customer facing innovations are not the limit. They will probably come
Mm,
from HQ. Let us just look at
mm.
what we can do to improve our own productivity, and very, very defensive, right? I always think of this as a parent of a teenager kind of thing, right? So teenager is in some ways you feel, oh, you should not be acting like a kid, but you'll also say to you, oh, don't think you're an adult. So they're always trying to
Correct.
find their boundaries. It's almost like that
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you want them to do better, but then you're not giving them
yeah.
the opportunity. So where does this get stuck? What are the practical reasons why this sort of behavior comes in that, oh no, this is not our remit. We should just, be within our cocoon.
Yeah, it's probably because of two things. One is fear of
Mhm.
failure, and number two is that lack of clarity on what the charter is. So some companies actually say that innovation is not in your
Okay.
charter. Now then you have to
Hmm.
fight it. You have to kind of, you shouldn't take it just at face value. You have to say that, look, we want to contribute to innovation also. And like I said earlier, some may be under the table, but some can be actually, we are doing this proof of concept, I want to show
Hmm.
it to you. So that if you don't do, then it's probably going to be, you're going to be left
Hmm.
behind. That's for sure. So the GCC leaders, one of the roles I would say is that to make it
Hmm.
aspirational for the people, and for that. So one is the HQ, convincing the HQ, but equally important is convincing your own
Correct.
team here, that they'll say, "Oh, nobody has told us to do that. Why do you want to do that?" Yeah, but it's important for you. If you want to add value to the company and to yourself, then this is
Right.
important today. And nothing, there's no bigger opportunity right now, because we have, luckily, it's kind of level playing field, except that the LLMs themselves are not
Right.
made here, but there are enough and more
Correct.
available for you to use them in whatever way you think is best fit. And the use cases are just, every industry, every situation
Right.
is a use
Right.
case. It's just a question of which one you prioritize and which one you figure out how to
Mm.
tackle.
Right. Yeah. So, is there any other practical difficulty that you think can be, we've spoken about navigating, say, through the budgets, right? Is that something which also sort of holds back teams?
It does at times, but it's always possible to see, if the company is doing badly, then getting a budget, let's say, for you know say a big bash or something, that may
Mm.
be difficult, but that's
Mm.
okay. That's, you can
Mm.
manage that. But it should not be that difficult to get a budget sanctioned or approved for something which is like a proof of concept for a
Mm.
innovation
Mm.
idea. I think that's usually, if you can't do that, then you're not doing a
Right.
job. So that you should be able to get, because these are not big
Mm.
numbers. I mean, you're not talking about millions of dollars for that.
Mm.
You're talking of a couple, two or three people working for a few hours and
Mm.
building
Mm.
something. So that should be
Right.
possible.
One other question that I wanted to ask on related to this is, how does leadership transition happen both at the GCC site head level and in the HQ? When a new GCC head comes, how does that person think of, okay, what will I change? Because you don't want to go and change for the sake of change. It
Yeah.
has to be within something. So maybe you were lucky that you were always setting up. So your canvas was much wider.
Ye-
What about people who follow you?
Yeah, so actually that's not true. In one of the places where both of us worked, there I took over
Right.
from somebody and then handed back again later. So there were definitely changes, but in general, and the flip side also, by the way, you are talking about GCC leader changing, but I'll tell you, in one company, in the first 3.5 years, I had 7 bosses. So literally, average 6 months, every 6 months, my
Right.
boss was changing. So that also is a
Correct. Yeah.
challenge,
Yeah.
right? Because you got to figure out, okay, what does this person want, and education starts all
Right.
over again, right? That whole, everything that you have to
Yeah.
teach
Right.
again to the person. And some of them had no clue. One of the guys I remember would come from sales side. He had no clue what even India is. So forget about engineering and all that. So that, those kind of things can happen. But in general, when you're talking about transition, the best way, and which we managed to do in a particular case, was actually have a succession plan, get the person groomed, give enough time, then slowly build that kind of start emanating that knowledge to, let's say, at a particular level. So SLT first, then they know that, okay, this person is
Mm.
going to be looked at as a
Mm.
next head. Then one level lower at the CXO level, then one level lower at the manager's level, and then finally you announce to the world, and then you make the
Right.
transition. So we were able to do that successfully over almost like a 3 to 4 year
Right.
period, gradually shifting that, and then it becomes
Right.
very smooth, because knows everybody, the systems are in place, everything happens. Sometimes you don't have the luxury. There's a sudden kind of a transition because somebody leaves, or and in that case, the trying to build systems. So I was a big believer in having succession plans. So every time somebody, no matter how well a particular person was
Right.
doing at a leader level, I would say all that is going well. Your metrics are great, KPIs, everything is fine, but you don't have a succession
Right.
plan. Tomorrow some bus was to hit you. What's
Right.
going to happen? Who's going to
Mm.
run this? So trying to force the
Right.
issue, because people don't
Mm.
want to do it, sometimes because of fear, sometimes because they don't think it's important, whatever. But having that good succession plan in place is absolutely critical. And if you do that, then it's like any other
Right,
transition.
right. Yeah, yeah. So I think, as I'm talking, getting this feeling that we need to record another separate episode to
Sure.
delve deeper into many of these topics. But this, I think, is a good segue to the next question that I want to ask you. As a viewer, how do you think the Indian cricket team's leadership transition has happened?
Oh, phenomenal. I mean, I don't think you could have expected a better transition. In fact, it was interesting that even during the five matches, right, first test, I think there was people were talking, the critics were talking about, some obvious strategic mistakes or tactical mistakes that Gill was doing as a captain. But toward as the series moved forward, and in the fifth test, I mean, he could do no wrong, right? He everything that he did was like
Right.
perfect. So I think one was that the young team probably wanted to have somebody who they could relate to. But at the same time, one other thing that happened and which really helped, I think, to Gill is he performed outstandingly as a
Mm-hmm.
batsman. Right, he was next only to Sunil
Right.
Gavaskar in terms of the total
Mm-hmm.
tally. So double century, century. I mean, it just
Right.
kept coming. And once you are doing really well in your
Mm.
primary role, then as a captain also it rubs off, and people automatically you gain that respect. You're not kind of trying to get earn that respect in some
Mm.
other way. So your confidence goes up in yourself, self-esteem goes up, and therefore you start becoming more decisive, assertive. So that also
Mm.
actually helped.
Mm.
And of course, credit to him that he could manage both and not get bogged down by the captaincy
Mm.
pressures,
Mm.
unlike some of the other bigger names that we
Right.
have seen.
Yeah. So, and what about the management change? Because that has also changed in the last 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there was this anecdote which they talked about, saying that Gill only talked about it, saying that uh, how did the head coach kind of what did they tell you, what did he tell you? So he said that, look, he said, forget about the fact that you're a young
Mm.
team. Think of yourself as a
Mm.
gun team, not young but
Right.
gun. Now that's kind of a thing, really pumps
Sure.
up people, saying that, okay, and it's no surprise that the two test matches where Bumrah, who was supposed to be our number
Mm.
one bowler, did not play, and we won
Right.
those matches. So it's almost like, okay, he's not there now. I have to put in double the
Mm.
efforts to kind of make sure that we don't
Correct.
miss him. No reflection on Bumrah's
Mm.
ability at all,
Mm.
unlike what some people are saying. There absolutely no doubt about the fact that he's the greatest fast bowler. But the fact that, yeah, okay, so what? If Rishabh Pant
Mm.
gets injured,
Mm.
so what? Jurel will be there. He will take
Mm.
the mantle. So nobody is indispensable, and we, as a team, if we do well, we can
Mm.
still win. That spirit, I think, credit has to be given to
Right.
Gambhir. No matter what one people
Mm.
might say, many people don't like
Mm.
him, but he has proven
Right,
himself.
right. And I think, for the Indian cricket team, this Indian Test cricket team, I think you should just impose artificial constraints by, saying that somebody is
Correct,
injured, somebody is not available, whether it is Gamma 21 or, every
correct.
time you've actually lost players, is when you've done
Yeah,
exceedingly well.
absolutely
Yeah,
right.
and people always try to find parallels between sports and management in companies. That I always keep saying sports is much easier because you can see a win versus a loss. You don't have a win in the company, right? It's difficult to have these episodes, but again, you draw parallels. You played cricket. Do you draw parallels? Do you see people making parallels, between their,
Yeah, yeah,
interests, sports?
absolutely. No, absolutely. In fact, the biggest thing I had to learn when I started working with the Americans is, every time you're in a meeting, the phrases that are used, okay, they tend to be
Right.
sports phrases, right? I mean, in India, for us, it's very easy to say he was on a back
Mm.
foot. Now, what the hell does an American know about what the back foot is? Right? So that's one example. Or it was a sticky
Mm.
wicket, right? I mean, these are things which we
Right.
grew up with, but I had to learn to kind of leave those aside, and then
Forward.
curveball is one phrase, that's one example, or hit it out of the park
Right.
another example, or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So blocking and tackling. So these are the phrases that, so the analogies are there all the
Right.
time. Even in business, you keep, you have to play offense, not
Right.
defense. These are the things which keep coming
Mm-hmm.
up. And I think it's important for people to understand, because if you don't have that common language, the
Correct.
context doesn't
Right.
become clear.
Right.
What are we
Right.
talking about? So but absolutely, I mean, it's ultimately, see, war, sports, and
Right.
business. There are parallels in all three. Now, obviously, you don't want to go to the war
Correct.
situation. These days, it's less common. Earlier, that was the most
Right.
common thing. But so, therefore, you draw analogies from
Right,
sports.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, Nitin. So this is a great conversation. Like I said, I think we need to have multiple
Sure,
chats. But
sure.
before I let you go, I'll ask you some questions, right? Um, uh, uh, a device, app, or tool that you will not do away with, even if, say, there's some restrictions. If you are still working in a company, CFO says, no, you can't have this.
Hmm. Well, I use a bunch of, like, not as much as you, but I use a bunch of AI
Hmm.
tools, whether it's Grok, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Gemini, all of them. So I don't think I'll be hung up on one
Hmm.
tool.
You
But
you have
yeah,
only
some,
one.
yeah,
You pick only
I have
one.
only one.
It can be anything,
Uh,
not necessarily an app. It could be a device. It could be something.
Smartphone, I think that's probably it. I mean, you can't do without
Or,
smartphone today. I mean, you can do without a
right.
laptop, but not without a smartphone.
Okay. You have unlimited budget to solve a global crisis. Okay. But so who will be your first phone call to?
Hmm. Interesting question. Definitely not to the UN.
You want to solve the problem.
Exactly. Not to the president of the US, not to Russia. Uh, maybe the Chinese
Oh,
president.
okay. That's interesting. As a
Yeah,
hopeful.
because between China and India, we have what, about 2.3
Right.
billion,
Yeah.
almost close to 3 billion people out of the 7 and odd
Right.
billion in
Right.
the world. So if these two can be, brought on the same platform, and agree to something, I think we can solve the world's
Okay,
problems.
fantastic. And last question, in Pune, so I have to ask you a flex question. So if you were to put up a flex banner all over the major cities in the world, what would be, say, the five to seven words that you'd put up on that list?
We can all live together.
Okay, fantastic. I think on that note, we'll end this conversation. Thanks a lot, Nitin. This is a great chat, and I
Thank you.
enjoyed it. Hope you did too.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here. I thoroughly did.
Yeah.